It's God's faithfulness. And these generations in Matthew, as he gives us a genealogy of Jesus Christ, are broken into three distinct groups. And the first one, remember, was kind of the patriarchs, starts with Abraham, only Matthew throws in four women. And we learned in his inclusion of the four women that God's a God of grace, that God uses everybody. It's not, how righteous we are, but God uses us the way that we are, as he used those four women in Jesus' tree. The next section was 2 weeks ago, and that of the kings. And we went through that long list of kings, and most of them were pretty bad kings. Remember that? And that resulted in discipline, where God sent them into exile, the Israelites into exile, in order to save them. And then this last section, this section that we have today is a period over 500 years, and it's kind of known as the Dark Ages of Israel, because there's no prophets. God doesn't do anything for a long, long time. And the men that are mentioned here, we don't know much about them. Most of them are not any other place in the Bible, except in this genealogy. And it's kind of like, God just waits for 500 years. So here we are in Matthew 1, 12 through 17. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was the father of Abihud. Abihud was the father of Eliakim. Eliakim was the father of Azor. Azor was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Akim. Akim was the father of Eliud. Eliud was the father of Eleazar. Eleazar was the father of Mathan. Mathan was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Christ. So there were 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the exile in Babylon, and 14 generations from the exile to Babylon to Christ. Do I have any corrections on the pronunciations there? No. A couple. We're going to let it slide. Thank you so much. Most of these names are not mentioned any other place in the Old Testament, and they're unknown. When it comes to fame, they're not that important people, But the Jewish people kept record of their ancestors because, like I've told you before, in order for them to own ground, they had to prove their family lineage. So although these guys don't do anything that we know about, still the record's kept. And the one thing that I see that this section has in connection with the other two is that all of these people were waiting. Thousands of years of waiting, all waiting. And Christmas is about waiting. Well, it used to be more about waiting than what it is now. We still require everybody to wait in our house, but the anticipation of waiting for Christmas, just to see the little kids, like the grandkids yesterday came in our house and the stockings are all hung up on the stairway and they went, whoa, And Avery says, there's nothing in them. I said, no, because Santa's put something in them on Christmas Eve. And she goes, there's 21 of them, and she's just all, just to see the little kids this time of year, it's all about imagination and anticipation. I hope that we don't ever lose that. It's slipping some in America. I saw the other day, National Retail Federation poll, 6 in 10 holiday shoppers this season will be making self-gifts, especially high-end luxury items. That means more than half of us have probably already bought yourself something for Christmas. Don't need to raise your hands. You can just name anonymous, but we just don't like to wait. And you've been to some of these exchanges, and Uncle Larry gets you a pair of socks again. He's not going to get you an iPhone or anything. So you go out and buy it yourself, right? Who else is going to do it? But you buy it. But didn't used to be that way. Not too long ago, 2 generations ago, you didn't put up a Christmas tree till Christmas Eve was when you put up your Christmas tree. And, when I was a little kid, you might open up one present on Christmas Eve, but that was it. There's no way you had Christmas before Christmas. And now it's changed. I know, and I'm not being critical of that. We travel around. We have to travel around and go here and there. And sometimes, 2 weeks ago, people were having Christmas with family members that they couldn't get together with. But I hope we never lose this waiting on Christmas. It's just an important thing. The point is that Christmas is always about waiting, whether it's the secular Christmas or whether it's the religious Christmas. We all must wait. And the line of Jesus lists men and women for over 2,000 years who wait. That's a long time to wait, generation to generation. Can you imagine telling your children, now someday there's going to come a Messiah? And then they tell their generation, and their generation is passed down from generation for 2,000 years to say someday there's going to be a Savior that comes to our nation. Just can't imagine that length. But there's purpose in this 2,100 years of waiting from Abraham to Joseph. That's the beginning and the end of this. The promise was first made to Abraham. Remember, Abraham was 75 years old, and God says to him, he says, you're going to be a father. You're going to be the father of a great nation. You know how long he waited for that? Just to be a father? 24 years. And can you imagine? He's 99 years old, the story goes, before he has his son. 24 years he waits. Long time. Genesis 26:4 is the promise. God says, I will give you as many descendants as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all these lands. All the nations of the earth will be blessed because of your descendants. One other place, God says, as much as the sand on the seashore, that's going to be your ancestors, or your descendants. So it's not one of blood, but it's one of faith. We are descendants of Abraham by faith. And then God told Israel that they would be a great nation and they would be able to leave slavery in Egypt. Well, it only took 400 years. They were slaves in Egypt. And then they had to wander in the desert for 40 years more waiting. They waited generation after generation. God said, you're going to have a Redeemer that comes. And they wait and they wait. And the strangest of all is when the Messiah finally comes, he's only recognized by a few people. Just a few people who are waiting. They waited and they waited. And over they ask, when, Lord? How long? How much longer? It's just like a child saying, how many days till Christmas? And we say, well, it's 2 weeks, and that's just way beyond their ability to understand. Always looking for the Messiah during the dark years, times when the prophets were silent, when there are no great leaders, when Israel is overrun by other nations. Finally, Israel is overrun by mighty Rome, and still some waited, some still believed that God was faithful, that his promises were true, and that his timing was perfect. And I think there's some reasons why we must wait. Good reasons why it's not only necessary, but it's beneficial. The first one is that the pieces are often not in place. Not everything has happened for God to be faithful, to prove his faithfulness. And some people tell you that everything's all planned out, that everything that happens is by design. Every last little thing, I don't know. I still see some free choice in this world where, or like we saw last week, I see some evil. Where evil does some terrible things. And to say that God plans every little thing out, I'm not sure I could say that. I don't know. I hope that doesn't stumble you today. But how much is scripted? I don't know. But I do know that God has a plan of salvation for every person. God has a plan for us to bring us close to him. And how much he orchestrates is quite a bit when it comes to that. When he wants to draw us closer to him, that's personal. That involves our contacts and other people and strange things that happen in life, like we get fired from a job and get another job someplace else, and we find out later that maybe we're a connection there for someone, But I believe that that's really God's hand at work. But he also has a plan that takes in the entire world. The fact that Jesus was born to Joseph and Mary, is not coincidental. That's what these begats, all this ancestry tells us, that Jesus was an heir to the throne of David. that makes him possible to be the Messiah. The fact he's born in Bethlehem had to happen. The prophets had said that he would be born in Bethlehem, the birthplace of King David. So Caesar, you see, had to order the census in order for Joseph and Mary to have to make that journey from up north in Nazareth back to Bethlehem exactly at the right time when she was going to give birth. And you think of all the things that had to take place in order for there to be a Caesar who was in control of Israel at that time at exactly the right moment. And of course, the fact that the Roman Empire was there had a huge role. Rome had conquered all of the Mediterranean, so people could travel anywhere that they wanted in peace. And the roads were all built. And after Jesus' death and crucifixion, we find that the gospel just spreads so fast because people can travel. They can go wherever they want. So it's all part of that plan. You see, it's no accident. It's exactly the right time. Paul said it like this in Galatians 4:4-5. He said, when the fulfillment of the time came, God sent his Son, born through a woman and born under the law. This was so he could redeem those under the law so that we could be adopted. See, when the fullness of time comes, everything is in place. Paul says it's the right time. God has it planned. We had waited. God was faithful. Finally, all the pieces are in place. Now, we might have a one-year plan. Come January, you might sit down and say, here's some of the things that I want to do this year. Some of us might have 5-year plans. We might have vocation plans. We might have retirement plans. But God has a plan for the whole earth, for all people to come to him. Does he plan out our days? Does he move people around and cause things to happen down to the smallest detail? I'm not sure. But I do know that God has a plan for all people to hear his word and to hear his gospel. After his ordination in 1969, pastor and author Philip Johnson received a call to serve one large church and 10 smaller churches on the northern coast of Newfoundland, Canada. First day of his new circuit, he had to go to the most remote and smallest church in this 10-church circuit that he had to ride to. He had to go 40 miles on snowmobile to get to it, this small little village. And when he arrived, only one person had showed up for worship. And it was a fisherman who had traveled 20 miles to get to this little church. So Johnson thought, he said, maybe I'll just say a prayer, call it a day. And then, of course, he's a young pastor, just ordained. He thinks, well, I don't know. Between us, we've traveled 60 miles to get here. We've got to travel 60 miles to get home. I might as well do what I came for. So he goes through the whole service, all the prayers, all the readings, communion, sermon, everything. He does everything. And he was really pretty disappointed because the one man that was there, this fisherman, during the sermon just sat with his head bowed the whole time. And he thought, come all this way and do all this stuff for this guy, and he sleeps through my sermon. You know how that is, don't you? But anyway, he wondered while he had bothered, and the fisherman didn't look up, and when he greeted the one man at the door to leave, the fisherman said, he says, Reverend, he said, I've been thinking about becoming a Christian for over 30 years. Today's the day. And Johnson realized why he had traveled 40 miles and this man had traveled 1. So you never know. All the pieces sometimes get in place for somebody. And the other thing I think about is that we sometimes have to wait. We often have to wait so that we can mature, so that we can grow up. Now, I know that this is a theme that I hit quite a bit with you guys, and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, nor should you think that I know something about it because I am so mature. But God does sometimes cause us to wait so we can grow up. If you want to completely ruin a person's life, give them everything they want when they want it. Just the minute that they ask for it, just say, here it is. Never make them wait for anything. Never make them want for anything. That'll completely ruin their life. They will grow up to be totally incapable of being grateful about anything, about working or being persistent about anything, but they will expect all of life to come to them easily, make them so discontent. I know that's true. Some of the worst things that have ever happened to me when I look back were that I got things easily, quickly. Sometimes people gave them to me without making me wait. But just because I wanted them, I got them. That's some of the worst things that's ever happened to me in life. And so it is with us. Remember Isaiah said, those that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. In Isaiah 40, we become stronger when we have to wait, even endure. It's when we look now back over the history of salvation as carried by the nation of Israel, it's easy to see that God was preparing them. God was making them wait. The times were dark. The times were silent. And in that time, God was preparing them for the greatest gift that was ever given, the gift of His own Son. And it's easy to see now, but it wasn't them. They wondered, well, why is the economy so bad? The economy was terrible when Jesus came. We don't talk about that. Did you ever think about this? We talk about our economy and how divided our nation is. The nation of Israel was extremely divided when Jesus came into different factions. And they fought like cats and dogs, just like what's going on in America right now. That's the way things were. Now we look and we see that they had so little, maybe because they didn't have much to lose. When the first people became Christians and Jesus asked them to leave everything that they had and come follow Him, they laid it down easily because they didn't have much to lay down. When we think about the rich young ruler who came and wanted to be one of His disciples and wouldn't give away that one thing that he held on to. But if you don't have much, it's easier to give it away, isn't it? So everything was happening for some maturity, for some people to get to the right place so God could do something in their lives. And I think that that's true for every person of every time. We do not easily believe in God's faithfulness. This is not something that you just grasp easily, that God is always going to provide for me, that God is always going to be faithful. We have to endure to mature. We have to lose so we can receive. Jesus said in Luke 17:33, He said, whoever tries to preserve their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life will preserve it. There's that same concept, you see, that we have to lose something in order to get something better. God cannot prove His faithfulness to us if we don't need it. If we have plenty, we don't much care if God is faithful or not. And so sometimes things get kind of dark. Sometimes relationships go on the wrong side. Sometimes things get kind of lean, kind of tricky. And it's then that we learn that God's faithful, that God always keeps His promises. You might remember the story of Tony Snow. He was the press secretary for George Bush, George W., for a while. He contracted cancer and fought cancer and then died 3 years later. And he was an inspiration to just about everybody that knew him. When asked what spiritual lessons he had learned from his battle, he replied, "We want lives of simple, predictable ease, smooth, even trails as far as the eye can see, but God likes to go off-road." I think that's a good way to put it. God likes to go off the trail with us. And why does God take us off-road? Well, God wants us to learn and to mature, to wait on Him, and to learn that even in the most difficult of times that God is faithful. But you see, we never learned that lesson unless we got into the difficult times. We might have some questions about our faith, how strong it is. Will we follow when no one else follows? I don't know. I've never been in that position. I've never been to that point where no one else was with me in my faith. I've not been tested in that. Will we love Him even when life is painful? Will we praise Him even when we're suffering? You see, sometimes we go through those things to mature, and God says, I'm faithful, and you will not know that unless you need me to be faithful. You know, we expect every year to get better and better. We expect our income to constantly go up, don't we? We expect every house to get bigger. We expect to acquire more and more as we go through life. I came from a farm economy, as a farmer for a while, and farmers look at things a little bit different. I know they look at a lot of things different, and some of that's not too good. But one thing that you learn being a farmer is that the crop this year may be better than the crop I have next year. And that's not being pessimistic. That's just settling on the reality of the weather. The weather determines how much crop you're going to get. So you'll have a good year, and the next year you have a lean year. It's no great shock because you know you're going to have some good ones and you're going to have some bad ones. And you take that and you apply it to the Christian life and realize that sometimes things are fruitful and sometimes things are easy. And oftentimes things are not that way. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's physical. So sometimes we go through some stuff that's our own causing, that we do it ourselves. But the years when we wait for better years are not lost. It's then that we grow. So, last thing that I think about with waiting is I wonder if God is waiting on me on anything today. We talk about waiting on God, and it strikes me that maybe God might be waiting on me to do some things or to not do some things. The genealogy of Jesus Christ tells us the story of God's plan. The royal line of Jesus is your line, only it's not your bloodline, it's your faith line. And we get into this family not by being born into it, we get into this family by faith. John 1:12 says, "Those who did welcome him, those who believed in his name, he authorized to become God's children." No matter what your family tree, you have the opportunity of being born into the family of God. It doesn't matter if your parents attend church or not. It doesn't matter if you come from a family line where no one has ever been a Christian. That just doesn't matter here. What matters to God is you. You join the family tree by faith, by trusting in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for your sins, and there's no other way to get there. God empties our hands sometimes so we can receive. God delays so none will be lost, he says. God withholds the temporary so we can get the eternal. We all have earthly genealogies. I was thinking about this the other day. Most of us know our grandparents. Some of us know our great-grandparents. Nobody knows your great-great-grandparents, do you? Oh, Steve or Jeff knows his great-great-grandfather. Well, he's the only one in the room. Forget he raised his hand. You won't know your great-great-grandparent. You don't know your great-great-great-grandparent, Jeff. Okay, thank you. You do not. His great-great-great-great-grand? No, I mean, do you know him? Okay, all right. We have a misunderstanding here. You didn't meet your great-great-great-grandfather. All right. You never know where it's going to go, do you? Okay. You realize that we will be forgotten. Our grandchildren may know us. Our great-great-grandchildren may know us. But there'll come a time when there's a grandchild that doesn't know us. They may see the picture, may hear a story. But we will be forgotten. That's a real encouraging thought here on this Christmas Sunday. My point is that there comes an end to the memory of our earthly life. Our genealogies in our families, there comes an end to that memory. But the family of God is eternal. The family of God has no ending in that. And as much as we treasure our earthly families, the family of God that is our bloodline or our faith line in this genealogy is so much more, so much better. We will not be forgotten today. We remember today that he sent his only Son that we might have life. And it strikes me today as much as we talk about us waiting on God, our faithful God, that God is probably waiting on us for something. Probably waiting on us to empty our hands so that we can receive what he has for us. Waiting on us to finally get serious about some of the things that he's trying to reach us in our life. When we let go, then we can receive. Well, let's sit in prayer over that for a minute.